Hello everyone! Are you all excited to visit Japan? It is quite obvious that they have a completely different culture and communication when it comes to us here in America. Today we will be covering some of those differences. After much intense research over their culture and communication, I hope you leave here feeling much more prepared, such as knowing that they are known for their politeness. As each of you will soon be taking a trip there, this information will allow you to better gain knowledge in how to communicate and act to the natives. When visiting Japan, the forms of communication will be completely different. We will be covering from the basics to gestures and even characteristics of the communication. Through this speech, I hope you will learn how to better understand and use this information. Now, on that note, I would like to get started. We will begin with the basics, such as communication style, gestures, and greetings. As in the Cultural Crossing Guide, they describe greetings are formal. They prefer bowing, but each is different with gender. Also in the Cultural Crossing Guide, they describe there is many different gestures, such as taking off your shoes in Japanese homes, hotels, and many restaurants. It is a sign of respect. They also describe waving your hand back and forth in front of your face signifies that you do not understand something. Also, pointing directly at someone is considered disrespectful. Instead, use your palm face up. In the Cultural Crossing Guide, they describe that Japanese prefer using indirect communication. Instead of getting straight to the point, they will use hints. We will also be going over personal space, eye contact, and views of time. As in the Cultural Crossing Guide, eye contacts, such as communication style, they prefer indirect. It is considered a form of respect towards elders and higher-ups. As in personal space, they prefer to be a few feet away from each other, unless you are in a big city or subway, which is hard, but they highly value personal space. Finally, in the Cultural Crossing Guide, they emphasize their deadlines and being on time. They really highly value time. In addition to this, let's move on to our next point. We will now focus and go more into depth with gestures, body language, and culture. In an article by Gary Amahi, he describes they highly value and respect their elders and family, so always be conscious and considerate of the elders when visiting Japan. Gary also describes to avoid public affection, blowing your nose in public, and making mouth displacements, such as yawning in public, as it is considered rude and disrespectful. Gary describes that they highly value education and that many kids learn the value of culture through school. Gary directly states interdependence but not independence is valued. They favor putting your family or the group in front of yourself. Gary also describes controlling your emotions in public is the norm and it is also considered a form of self-control. He also describes that taking the safe path to succeed is the norm, such as taking a career path that is safe and achievable. Risk-taking is usually frowned upon and discouraged. Finally, let's move on to our last point. There are many different characteristics to depict and understand that will help you. In a survey taken, Kiyoshi Minoke describes that American students are found to want to be praised, recognized, and admired, compared to Japanese students that prefer keeping harmony and getting along with others. This shows that they are a collective society over an individualist. Kiyoshi describes also in another survey that they asked Japanese students and American students to describe themselves. It is found that American students can do so in a non-social context, while the Japanese were opposite. Kiyoshi also describes that the Japanese put a high priority in keeping good relationships with others and wanting peace. Also, in another survey taken, Kiyoshi describes that it is found that Japanese prefer wanting a boss that makes them work extra hard, but also takes extra good care of them. This shows that they are an interpersonal relationship society compared to an individual. Minoke states that observers in Japan describe a commonly used Japanese communication style. It is silence, shyness, ambitiousness, and a smile. Japanese rely highly on nonverbal communication and mutual assumptions. They are able to do so because their society is homogeneous. And for example, there are about 15 different ways to say no. Now, with that, let's conclude this speech. But first, let's refresh each point one more time. To begin with the basics, such as bowing as a formal greeting. Then there was a focus on gestures and body language. For example, not showing too much public affection. Finally, there were characteristics. For example, they heavily rely on nonverbal communication. I would like to thank you all for being here today, and I hope as you all take your trip, you remember to enjoy your experience as many others won't get to.